Buying a cheap flood car is a great way to save money, and an even better way to lose your sanity. Even though we bought this special Corvette completely dead and missing its keys, it only took a few cheap domestic car parts, some oil, and a quick tune-up to get it running, and I thought for sure it would be a cleanup away from being a home run deal. But we got it running months ago, and up till now we haven't been able to figure out why it won't run right. Now, when you have a problem with a car, and say that problem is that it smokes out the tailpipes, there's usual areas to diagnose and figure the problem out. But a lot of this logic goes out the window with a flood car, and especially a unique flood car like this ZR1. In our case, smoke out the tailpipe wasn't really a problem with the engine burning oil or something wrong with the fuel system, but salt-watery muck that flowed into the resonator through the tailpipes when the car was flooded. And while I thought this residue would burn off in just a few minutes, hours of idling later, this car was never gonna stop smoking until we completely replaced the entire exhaust system. Even after replacing this and quite a few other parts, it was still acting up in very strange ways. Last we left off, the Vette was overheating, but only at idle. At the same time, we noticed the voltage gauge was dropping really low. And while I'm confident we can tackle these issues, I'm not as sure as the problem we've had all along, and that's again the way the car runs. Just driving it normal, you'd never know there was an issue. It idles pretty much perfectly, and it moves down the road with ease, but the second you put your foot into it, there's a significant lack of power. We refreshed the ignition system, filled it up with new gas, replaced a faulty cam position sensor, but still, the car breaks up over a few thousand RPMs. After doing a bit more searching around online, I found a support article that mentioned failure of the fuel injectors on anything prior to a 1992 Corvette ZR1, and this was due to them being incompatible with ethanol. It described almost the exact scenario we were experiencing, and to quote the article, the engine runs fairly well after a cold start and then starts to run rough as the engine warms up. As the fuel injector failure progresses, the engine will develop a misfire when hot. So again, another situation that isn't very typical on a modern car, but a problem that seems pretty easy to tackle. Sorting this out means the plenum has to come back off, which I guess isn't the worst job in the world. I mean, I'd much rather do this than say wait in the line at a post office. If only every solution with this car was as simple as using stamps.com, where you're always a few clicks and a print away from getting the best deal on postage no matter what you're sending, because stamps.com passes on the carrier discounts to you with rates up to 84% off UPS and USPS. And if you don't have a scale, no worries, because when you visit stamps.com/Samcrac and sign up, they'll send you one for free. I know there's a bunch of you watching right now that have to ship something out, whether it's a letter or a package, it doesn't matter. I forbid you to stand in line at the post office. Head on over to stamps.com/Samcrac or hit the link in the description. We know you're gonna save money and you're gonna save a good bit of time, but even better, you're gonna get a free 4-week trial along with some postage to get you started and a free digital scale with no contracts or commitments. It's all over at stamps.com/Samcrac. All right, we got the plenum back off the car. I pulled this bank of injectors up and they are stuck in place. These are definitely the originals. And in order to get them up, I've got a pry bar, but I've got this hockey puck here so we don't do any damage to our heads. So I'm basically just gonna go in an area on the rail where there's nothing to break. This side would probably be a little bit easier. Let's see here. Let's wiggle it a little. There's nothing holding this in place. Come on. Here we go. Longer pry bar. Here we go. Ah! Ooh, ooh. There's the rail. And what we found here were definitely the original ones from 1991. Pretty much everyone replaces these with an aftermarket brand, as the factory ones are ultra expensive. Now you might notice there's actually 2 injectors per cylinder for a total of 16. So this job can get a bit pricey, but I opted for an OEM spec brand name rebuilt set from a reputable company that were flow matched and direct drop-in with no modification necessary. And while you can see the tips are different between the primary and secondary injector for the ZR1, these injectors are otherwise the same, with the same amount of fuel output. Fuel injector replacement on the non-direct injected cars are usually pretty straightforward. Just pull the old ones out, clean everything, and press the new ones in. All right, if anything's gonna fix our ZR1, it's these fresh injectors. I've got oil on all the O-rings, and we really just need to seat everything in place, make sure there's no vacuum lines in the way except for the one that's supposed to be in the way. And when we drive down the 4 screws that hold the rail in place, well, It should seat everything and we'll be finished. And then the only other things we need to change out are these right here. These are the plenum gaskets. So this one's gonna go something like this. We'll put the other one loosely in place here. These are kind of finicky when you're putting the plenum back on top, and you need to make sure they're aligned at all times. Otherwise, you'll either tear them up or the screws won't fit in. We've done it once before. We'll be good to go. We've just got a bit of assembly, and then we'll move on to our cooling system here. Got the brand new alternator installed here. We were getting ready to put the belt back on. Mike noticed something. Check this out. The tensioner is loose. You can pull it back with your hands. You shouldn't be able to do that, and that's likely what's causing that rattling noise we hear when we start this car up. Now, unfortunately, they don't make this part anymore. It seems impossible to find like a lot of other ZR1 parts, but we've got an alternate solution here. Now that we've got this popped open, you can see what comes apart inside one of these. That portion popped off. This just kind of comes undone. And there you go. There is the coil that keeps the tension on your tensioner. Basically, we need to pull this out and replace it. The idea here is simple. By disassembling the tensioner, we can replace its wear components, specifically the coil spring and pulley. Now, you can't just buy the spring by itself. We'll need to source one from a same-year standard Corvette tensioner. Now, like I said, the ZR1 tensioner is unobtainium. Look them up, you won't find a single one for sale new or used. And you would think that the standard C4 tensioner is readily available, but even these prove to be a bit difficult to find. Not a single local parts store carries them, and I only found one generic branded one available for sale online. Since this is something we had to order and wait on, I figured we'd use this downtime to make our ZR1 look a little bit more like a car and less like a project. So I went ahead and picked this up online. This was about $100, and it is a fiberglass recreation piece of the lower fender. They make them in all the different styles for pretty much every single C4 Corvette, and it's in pretty good shape. It does have what looks like a primer coating on it, but we'll go ahead, give it a quick scuff, and then another layer of 2K just to make sure it's super solid before we go and paint it blue. Everything is scuffed and clean. Before we get some color on it, we're going to shoot it with this Eastwood 2K epoxy primer. What's so cool about this product, when you used to buy 2K primers or clears in a rattle can, there used to be this activator button on the bottom, and the cans would literally only last like 12 hours or something after activating them. Well, you don't have that with these new cans because there's actually 2 chambers built in, and as this sprays, it mixes both the catalyst and the primer itself. Yo, Candyman.
Oh, what's going on, Sam?
Can you fix me up with this?
What do you got?
So this is off of a C4 Corvette. This is a reproduction panel that covers the battery. And basically, this is a 30-year-old car. And I know that they sell some off-the-shelf paint, but I'm not so sure it'll match well. You tell me, can we get the off-the-shelf stuff, or are you gonna have to mix something that'll match it?
Well, I think you got a better chance of getting struck by lightning to have the can match off the shelf, but I think I got something that'll fix you right up.
All right, what do you got?
So we got this here camera, and it'll get us in the ballpark and get us the closest thing you're gonna get that's actually in the database.
So I also brought you this right here. That is just a test panel, so you have the actual color of the car.
You could have cleaned it a little, but now I gotta do 3 steps instead of 1.
You don't got like a used microfiber? I feel bad you're using a brand new one for this.
These are the Walmart ones.
Okay.
And they're reasonable. All right, so first get the dirt off, obviously, and then you want to polish it up to get the best reading. That way you could see the paint without any scratches, because the scratches will sometimes hide the camera from picking up the color right. So we'll polish it up. This is a 93 now, so this technology is up to date.
Oh look, it pulled it right up. Yeah. Medium quasar.
Yeah. So it's definitely seeing it good. So that's the original color here, and then it's going to show us the closest matches to it here. So we see that it's a little bit light. See that there? Mm-hmm. This gives you the capabilities of actually turning it so you can see the flop. so you can get the side tone and you can really see what this camera is picking up. This is all new technology. It's actually giving us an option to adjust it.
And so that's going to change the mix formula for you when you go in.
You see here, it shows the original, and then it shows you here with it adjusting it, leaving out some stuff. I think we'll start with this and we'll roll with the adjusted and see what we get.
So this computer here is connected with the one outside. Right now, we're taking that adjusted mix, and here it's showing everything that Candyman's gonna go and stick in the little cup there. And so this is pretty cool. It tells you how much toner to put in as he's adding it. All right, how'd it turn out?
You tell me.
Looks pretty darn good. There's only one problem that I see. It's gonna look better than the rest of the car.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot shinier, but I did actually use something else on it. You said you wanted to use...
Yeah, I wanted to get a rattle can. They know that you can paint panels, all right? What about whole cars? You working on anything cool today?
Actually, I just finished one up. Come check this out. So this is a 1972 Oldsmobile Cutlass convertible. We did a restoration on it, stripped it down to bare metal, put epoxy primer, and took it all the way down. That way we had a nice job that would last a long time for the customer.
Now I saw that car when it was sitting right here where we're standing. Have you put some videos online already?
Yeah, they're all up from the beginning to what you see here.
You do everything from these Teslas that we see, modern cars, to complete restorations, and even tiny little trim pieces on C4 Corvettes. So I appreciate it.
That's just for you though.
Thank you very much. Check out the Candyman. Visit him right here. Let's get back and finish this thing. All right. Look what turned up all the way from the West Coast, our C4 belt tensioner that we're going to use to scavenge a few parts out of to rebuild our ZR1 belt tensioner. All we really need out of here is the spring. We'll replace the pulley while we're at it just because there's a new bearing in here. Why not? And this should come apart pretty easy. It hasn't been in a hot engine bay for 3 decades. We'll take everything apart in the same fashion that we did with our old tensioner. All we got to do is compress that spring and get it back into the old casing. The new coil has so much tension compared to the old one. It's very, very difficult to compress. I think they make a special tool for this, but we've got it in the vise here sticking up. Let's see if we can't slide the casing back on. So it's not going to slide on, but maybe a mallet. I just want to get it square. This is so shifty. This ain't going to work. Here we go. 1, 2. Ready?
Yeah.
Wait, hold on. Just stay right there.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. 1, 2. We got golf swing. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Here we go. Every time we would get the spring in, it would be at an angle, which is obviously not ideal, but we figured it would tap in place the rest of the way. Here we go. But after an hour of messing around with this thing, we made a massive mistake in trying to force it in. The casing completely broke, and this is the part where I found that absolutely nobody has a spare one of these for sale anywhere. I desperately called all around, and the only advice I received was to have mine fixed. I even took it to a local welding shop who took a look at it and said it can't be fixed. We all know can't is the real C word, so instead of wasting any more time, I sent the piece to my longtime friend Peter Zila, a professional fabricator who seems to be the resident YouTube welding instructor. If anybody can fix it, it's Zila.
All right, let's see what we got here. Let me put my glasses on first. Oh, there you go. There. That's a perfect clamp right there. So now here I'm welding this up with this brand new HTP Revolution 2500. An absolute awesome machine that luckily I was involved when the page was blank, and I got to play designer a little bit and make a little kid's dream become reality and design my perfect welding machine. And if you need something fixed that 3 other shops told you how it's unfixable and it can't be done, send me an email. You'll see it right there, and I will tell you what I can do for you. The result is a functioning part. The car works, mission accomplished.
Because Peter was able to repair our tensioner casing, well, he single-handedly saved this project from being parked next to that red C4 out there, not being spoken on, well, at least for a very long time, because I went to a local welding shop, like I said. I called all around, even to Dayco, the original manufacturers of the ZR1 tensioner, and asked if they could compare any diagrams they might have to any other similar parts. They couldn't give me any information. I started modifying the regular C4 tensioner that I showed you earlier, and it was just turning into a nightmare. So by him fixing it, gave us an easy solution. And while he had it, I sent him the spring that goes in the casing there, so I didn't mess it up again. And if you haven't noticed the theme of this project, it's been a huge group effort from the beginning. I've had a ton of help from friends, family, forum members, you guys at home, and I can't thank you enough. So I want to do something a bit fun right now, and I want to give away these. This is a dealer promo ZR1 in Quasar Blue from 1991. This is something that the dealership would have given you if you bought a ZR1 or maybe put a deposit on a ZR1. And like I said, this is the original from 1991 in the same exact spec that my car is. Even the undercarriage has what I've been looking at for the greater part of a few months here. All you have to do to win one of these is subscribe to either Peter Zila or the Candyman's channel. These are guys that are teaching things on a weekly basis on their channel. Peter, a welding instructor and fabricator who actually designs welding machines. Candyman, a veteran painter of 30 years. All you gotta do is follow either one of their channels and drop a comment on any one of their videos. We'll be monitoring them over the next week or so, and you'll get a reply to one of those comments letting you know you've won. I'll be giving away a handful of these, especially if you're a younger viewer and looking to enter a new trade. These are guys that you're gonna learn something from that are very good at their skills. So again, follow either one of their channels or both. I will allow 2 entries, one on either channel. No more than that. All the information is going to be down in the description box. Now, all we've got to knock out is our cooling system. When we originally got the ZR1, we drained pretty much all the coolant out of the radiator, just working on various components around the engine, and then we went and filled it all back up. And it did overheat on us a few times, but once we actually went and vacuum filled this, it never really overheated when we were driving it. It was only overheating at idle. Now, if you're overheating at idle, you can generally point to one of 2 things. The first would be the radiator fans or the radiator. If the radiator fans aren't kicking on or not kicking on fast enough, they're not going to be able to pull all the heat that this is generating out of the engine bay, and you could overheat that way. But our fans are kicking on, so I want to believe the issue is with our original radiator, and if you look really close, I'm pretty sure it is. Now, I left this out in the rain, and so there's not as much of this gummed up dirt that you could see in between the fins, but there was quite a bit of it in the front of this. But if you take a really close look in between the fins, you could see there are a ton of what look like little stones just in there, clogged up. And like I said, a bunch of dirt in between each of the fins to start off with. That combined with the fact that this radiator is the same one they used on all the C4 Corvettes, and we're dealing with a much more powerful engine that does generate more heat. People have complained about the performance of this radiator out of the box being fitted in the ZR1. And like I just told you, the fact that that radiator was fitted in all the C4 Corvettes across the board makes our solution to our overheating problems very simple, and that's just to replace the radiator, since you can actually buy one of these off the shelf. Even better, there are a ton of companies that sell these triple pass performance all aluminum racing radiators for the C4 Corvette. It's a bit thicker, it's a direct fit, all the ports are in the same spot. They only cost about $120. So this new radiator, combined with a replacement thermostat that's a few degrees cooler than our factory one, I think will eliminate our overheating issues once and for all. It has felt like an eternity, but finally we have the ZR1 on all 4 wheels and tires on the ground, off the lift arms, a ton of new replacement parts that I'm hoping solve a lot of the different problems that we had. I'm going to leave the fan shroud off just for the time being because we are ready to test. I'm going to go ahead and slap the air intake on. And I'm just thrilled we're going to finally get this car out of the barn under its own power. Seeing this finally outside the barn gives me a little bit of hope that we have knocked out our main issues with the ZR1, because we have replaced a lot of different components underneath the hood here, but all for good measure. We had a lot of different problems all along the line, and if this doesn't work, well, I don't know what will. Let's start off with the fact that we have a brand new exhaust system, including brand new manifolds, because we had that smoky, mucky stuff stuck in our old exhaust. We have brand new fuel injectors. We have new intake manifold gaskets. We have a new starter, and a lot of the ignition system has been refreshed. A new drive belt, which was really important because our old drive belt was all cracked up when we took it off. And we have a belt tensioner fix, which we didn't know, but we found while we were in there was failed, and that's why it was making all sorts of noise. A lot of the cooling system has been replaced, including new radiator hoses. If, again, this doesn't work, I don't want to know what will. Before we're able to test this out, we have to fill up our cooling system. I've got my air compressor hooked up so we can do a quick vacuum fill. Whoa, my God. So much better than before. Accelerates like I remember. This is a really unbelievable car considering how old it is, and I think it feels really darn fast as well. And it is like, it's a little weird because you've got this old 90s GM interior, but the way the car actually rides and handles is years ahead of the way it actually looks. Exhaust, because you can rev it out, you can still hear yourself think. It's muffled perfectly. You get that really nice deep V8 tone without it just blasting your ears off. You could hear I lifted a few times there. I don't know the car well enough. I'm not so sure about the age of these tires, but it is a tremendous amount of fun. You might notice that the steering wheel airbag has been missing for a while now while we've been testing the car. It's sitting right in the trunk, and it did come with the car. But when we took this all apart to switch out the ignition barrel, we went and put everything back together. When we got to the airbag, this wire here, which is the ground wire for the horns, it just won't fit back in place. And I'm thinking it's because of this little bent spring on the end. And I was trying to look for a creative solution, since it really is just this little spring right here. But I found out that they sell replacement wires for around $5 online. So I've got this here. We're just going to go ahead and solder it in place of the old one. We should be good to go. And when the connector back on the airbag, this just kind of goes right back in place. And then I'll go ahead and throw a screw on either side, and our interior is complete. You know, several times through the repair process of our ZR1, I wasn't sure it would ever run right again. But it does, and it really works exceptionally well. And if we didn't buy this, the next guy in line likely would have been a parts breaker because of the scarcity of the parts in these cars, and it would have just been chopped up. So I'm really happy we were able to save this one, and if you were as well, be sure to hit that like button. Now, the C4 ZR1 is probably the car that is the most impactful to my car life, and that's because my Uncle Peter owned one, and every time we would go visit Uncle Pete and Aunt Maria, it'd be sitting there. It was bright red, and it was always in his garage. He hardly ever took it out, but everyone that walked past this car was enamored with it, especially me. And every year we would go and visit. I just remember wanting to get an up-close look at this car, but my parents telling me, no, stay away from that. We don't want you to break anything. Until one year he finally asked me, do you want to go for a drive? And of course, I was dying to drive. And now I imagine I was about 11 or 12 years old. My younger brother came along with us, sitting in my lap in the passenger seat. He was probably 5 years old, and just a few feet out of my Uncle Peter's driveway, he did a pull with that first to second shift like we just did, where the whole tail kicked out, and it scared me to death. I went from being enamored with the car to never wanting to ride it in again. Now, my Uncle Pete, he lived outside of Detroit, over 1,000 miles away from me, but we always kept in close communication, probably on a weekly and in some cases a daily basis, and really bonded over our passion for cars. And I would visit him pretty much every single year to go drive the ZR1 and some of his other cars in the Woodward Dream Cruise. And when I just started making videos, just a few months in, I happened to be visiting my Uncle Pete, and I asked him, do you mind if I take your ZR1 out for a drive and make a video on it? It's just a cool car that nobody really seems to talk about. And he was thrilled with the idea. But the funny part about this is nobody was ever allowed to drive Uncle Pete's ZR1 but Uncle Pete. The story goes that only his wife had driven it one time when there was no other cars available and she needed to meet him somewhere. Now, at the time I recorded this video, his 94 ZR1 had only 6,000 or 7,000 miles on it. So it was a true garage queen that would probably be worth a tremendous amount today. But shortly after I released that video, pretty much anything I'd release afterward, I'd get a call from my Uncle Pete. Hey Sam, did you figure out what's wrong with the Ferrari? The wheels that came on it are awful. You should really swap those out for a factory set. You know, the OEM ones always look best. He's really the greatest guy, and I don't know if it ever dawned on me, but someone who was so influential in my life was starting to get influence back. And I think we had one of the best friendships family members could ever have. Unfortunately, a few years ago, my Uncle Peter passed away suddenly. There was no major warning signs or anything like that, and it was a shock to all of us. And one of the things I had talked with him a bunch about, and I always wanted to do, was fly up to him outside of the Motor City, buy something cool, something with a big V8 in it, and resurrect it in his driveway. And it's something I never got the opportunity to do, but I think about it all the time. But with buying and resurrecting this ZR1, every single day I've gone to work on it, it's reminded me of my Uncle Pete. And he was a guy that always finished a job. So even though there were a few weeks of downtime between videos on this, I was determined that we were gonna finish it, and we did. So Uncle Pete, this one is for you, and I wanna thank each and every one of you for coming along on the ride. First gear, we gotta make sure the nose is pointed straight. I mean, my God, it's so fast. It's so fast, this car. It's so much fun. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to one of my favorite people in the whole world, my Uncle Pete, who has given me many memories in this car, and let me take it out today to share it with you guys.